take pictures.
All right, we're here. We're back. It's taking it down. We'll start with the YouTube stuff first.
Yeah.
Back with me, co-host for the podcast, writer for the Alabama Take, Mr. Ty Edmondson's back.
I'm back. I'm
Before
here when he needs me.
Yeah, there you go. Always.
Uses me like a pawn.
Related or even beyond that. You're a former listener of the week. Our summer reward specific to people who follow and listen to the podcast. As a past winner, what can you say about it? How was the Dilly bar?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, it's one of the best rewards I could have ever received, honestly. I felt truly honored.
If I've got an ad read to insert here. Let me just read this straight from my paper here.
All good.
It says, Taking It Down is brought to you by Dairy Queen, DQ, where the Dilly bar is something you can always eat or shove in your butt. DQ, grill, and then, if you do not have options, chill, Dairy Queen. Find one near you and enjoy a Dilly bar in your butt. I think that's what they wanted me to say.
For a second, I actually thought there was going to be an ad, and I got caught off guard.
We don't have ads.
Oh, goodness,
they don't want us. No one wants us. You've got our listener of the week, don't you?
I don't.
You don't have our listener of the week?
I was not given that by you, no.
Oh, I thought, well, who is it? Is it Brady Edmondson this week?
Oh, it's Brady Edmondson this week. Yeah.
Brady.
I think that's a good listener of the week. He's a great contender for that.
He enjoys a Dilly bar, surely.
Surely.
All right. It's been a few weeks since you sat in the co-host chair, though. You're our go-to movie guy much of the time, some of the time. What makes a movie great? I really wanted to ask you this.
Yeah.
You know, you like all kinds, but art house movies, you like those.
Yeah.
You gravitate toward the kind of movies that maybe not everyone knows about, like Fallen Angels is your favorite? Yeah, that's right.
That's my all-time.
So what makes those movies that you consider great, what makes them great? What are you looking for in a film before you tell me it's good?
A lot of it is like, if I can look at a film and like tell that it's completely set apart from everything else. Like if you look at my top 4, every single one of my top 4 movies are so like different than like everything else in the space of cinema itself. So if there's something that is like completely different from the rest in the best ways possible, that's what I really like. Like I like when directors take that chance and like step outside of the box, which is like a lot of what I wrote in my article about Marvel is that like they're not taking enough chances and they're not stepping out of the box, which is what's making it a problem. And that's what I really look for in film in general, and especially like upcoming directors.
Originality.
Yeah, big time.
Did you like originality in all aspects? Like it's got to have like the script, the cinematography, the acting.
I think it's okay to stick. Like I think it's a great idea to stick to formulas, especially when it comes to acting and things like that, because acting has been so set in stone for so long, and there's so many different ways to tackle acting that there's not a whole lot that you can do that is completely different from a performance that has come before the rest. So I think there are formulas for a reason, and I think it's okay to stick to them sometimes. But I do love, especially when cinematography and like audio mixing are like different and completely, like sound design and cinematography are like a big like sleeper part for me that I like love to like delve into whenever everyone else is kind of looking at other aspects of the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I admired the cinematography on a movie we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Knock at the Cabin, but I won't get into that. That's something I'll probably bring up. You wanted to tell me what's been on your radar.
Oh yeah. So I lately hopped on the train of Succession, and I've been kind of barreling through it, and it's fantastic. And I was recommended it by my brother, who's now the listener of the week. Congratulations, Brady.
That's why he gets listener of the week.
Oh yeah, big time. But it's great, and I understand the hype behind it. And if you know me, I've told a couple people this. I love corporate settings, like settings of like corporate buildings and like just in general like corporate lingo. And this is all about that. So I don't know how I didn't jump into that sooner, because I just love everything about it. It's so fantastic. Like I can't stop thinking about it, and I have to tell everyone about it.
How far are you?
I'm season 3, episode 6 now. I
And
think
there are
so.
only 4 seasons.
There's only 4 seasons. Yep.
Wow.
So I'm nearing the end.
I've heard that a couple of things that I'll ask you one at a time. I heard like the first 3 or 4 episodes are hard to plow through.
I think that's fair. When I look at those compared to the rest of the series, I think that's when they were trying to get their foothold. Like, I agree.
The second thing is the reason why I didn't watch it initially and still have, well, the reason why I didn't jump on board was because I'd seen a couple of reviews that says just rich white people being rich white people. And I don't know, something about that didn't sound appealing.
A little. I would say that's definitely a large majority of the film is like, this is going to be such a strange comparison, but the way that It's Always Sunny deals with a cast of characters that is just reprehensible. Like everyone in there sucks, but you still watch it and you enjoy it. It's a very similar feeling. Like everyone in Succession, especially in the first season, you're like, I hate everyone. Like everyone sucks. And it's definitely meant to be like that, because of the large ego, like centric ideas that they have, because they are rich white people being rich white people. But it definitely branches out. Like there's members of the family that aren't like that, and the way that they interact with each other is the real like bread and butter of the show. And it's also super interesting to see a rich white person leading America essentially, like crumble apart, and like everything just crumbling like before them is so interesting, and that's what that show does best in my opinion.
All right, so Succession, catching up on it. You recommended. We gathered today specifically to talk about a recent horror movie, Knock at the Cabin.
Yep.
It's actually a 2023 film, a recent one from M. Night Shyamalan. It's also recently streaming on Peacock. Stars Dave Bautista, Rupert Grint,
Yep.
Jonathan Groff, Nikki Amuka Bird, and Abby Quinn. Mm-hmm. That's why we picked it, because it was recently streaming on Peacock. We stick to TV and streaming. It's based on the novel The Cabin at the End of the World from horror writer Paul Tremblay. I think is how you say his name. That's probably correct. We'll spend some time going over some generalities before we spoil. In fact, we'll take a break before we spoil anything so that there's a clear line in the sand. The basic outline is 4 strangers try to take control of a married couple and their adopted daughter who are vacationing in a cabin out in the woods in Pennsylvania. And they kind of show up out of nowhere. That's about all you would want to know. Even if you don't know that, that's like the very first scene. The movie doesn't hesitate to get into where it's going.
Yeah.
So you haven't read the book. I have read the book. Mm-hmm. I thought that it was so different watching this movie in particular, knowing all the plot points. This made
really?
Yeah, it's one of the times I've sort of struggled with a movie because I'd already read the book. Usually that's not the case. This one, it was hard to look at it through the lens of someone who didn't know what was going to happen.
Oh, wow.
So what'd you think about it overall?
Overall, I thought it was entertaining. It kept my attention for sure. And I watched it in the theater with my brother when it first originally made its rounds. And we both liked it, and we thought the acting performances were serviceable and they were good, especially Dave Bautista, which I hope that he gets more performances because he's good. Like, he really is good. And I think he made a claim in an interview that he's the best wrestler or something turned actor, and I would agree, honestly. He's pretty great in this movie, and he has like a sort of huge innocence, like very foreboding innocence, which is, I think, great for a large majority of the film. And I thought the plot was very interesting and kind of kept my attention up until the end, which we can talk about later. But I thought in general the bottle aspect of the film worked very well, how it's just bottlenecked into this one location and the tension just grows and grows and grows. And that's kind of what M. Night is known for. And he does that very well in this film. And overall, I just thought it was pretty entertaining, if not with a couple of flaws.
That's kind of where I landed. I think the flaws ended up being bigger for me a little, but we are very much in the same arena. It's hard not to compare Dave Bautista to Dwayne Johnson. I mean, I know there are other wrestlers who've done acting, but theirs have a very similar trajectory. And here's my argument. You can't picture Dwayne Johnson doing this.
No.
My challenge to you is honestly picture Dwayne Johnson in this role.
I couldn't.
Exactly.
Because see, the thing is that he's already made a typecast.
Yeah.
He is The Rock. But like Dave Bautista can go so many different ways. Like that's kind of how I was thinking, because he played Drax, and Drax was like this funny, like kind of zany character. And then he also has played this role, which is, like I said, like a school teacher in this movie, and he's very like reserved and friendly and like soft until he like doesn't need to be. But I thought that was like a great aspect of him, and that he hasn't been typecast, so he has that ability to kind of go in between roles and try out different things.
Not to get too deep in wrestling, but The Rock was always known to be funny.
Yeah.
And like he had these one-liners when he was a wrestler, when he was The Rock. He had one-liners constantly, even when he was a heel or a good guy face. He was always funny. That was what you expected. But Batista was just intimidating. And
Okay.
in fact, there was a lot of... When he first came out as a wrestler, I was still watching wrestling. And
Was he WWE?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was many complaints about how he was no good on the mic. Don't give him the mic. Give him a manager, because he can't pull that. He can't pull his weight on the mic.
Yeah.
And in fact, they put him with 3 other wrestlers, and he was in a wrestling stable. It was Ric Flair, Triple H, Batista, and Randy Orton, and they just had Batista as the monster who never said much. And look at him now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that worked out for him because he had a blank slate coming in, I think.
Yeah. I think that's great.
He might have had a better acting coach or something too than Dwayne
Yeah.
Johnson.
I wouldn't
Or he's
doubt
worked
it.
harder at it.
Yeah. Or just cares about it more. Because honestly, like a lot of the time, I could see Dwayne Johnson doing it more for the paycheck than the actual like love of acting. Because a lot of his roles are just the exact same.
Yeah,
I
if
mean,
you go
the
by roles.
exact same. Yeah.
That's right. What about M. Night Shyamalan? He's the director. What do you think about him? Because you get into specifics of a director. Is the reaction to him overblown of late, or do you think that he is losing a lot of what he had?
So the thing is that I don't think he's so complex in the way that his movies are the most hit or miss thing I have ever witnessed. And this movie, by a large margin, is very different, because it's not like, see, some of his movies you can go into and be like, wow, that was great. And then others, they're either just awful. I mean, look at The Last Airbender. That is like one of the worst rated movies of all time. And Old recently, I heard that was not great. I didn't watch it personally, but my brother did, and I heard it was awful. But this movie, I went into it expecting, they're like, oh, it's either good or it's either bad. And I was just like, kind of right down the middle. It was just like, okay, this seems like he was playing it very safe. So I feel like he has his own style of like big twists and stuff here, and like tension building and things like that. And I think he does that pretty well most of the time. But again, he's generally, to me, pretty uninteresting. But like whenever his name pops up, I'm like, oh, like this is either going to be pretty good or pretty bad. And I kind of shove him in that box, which is a little, I guess, rude of me to do, but in the way that like he kind of is in that box of hit or miss. And I haven't really seen him exit that box. Because like, for example, Split. Like, I love Split. Split is fantastic to me. I think that movie is super entertaining and is great. But this movie, like, it doesn't even feel like it's directed by the same person. But yeah, I think the hate is generally deserved. But when he gets the love, I mean, he deserves the love. He's a pretty good director, and he's made a name for himself.
I think he's super great at the tension. And
Yeah.
I think he's lost his touch with any sort of twist, which is
I
something we'll
agree.
talk about with this movie. My most recent encounter with him is the show Servant on Apple TV Plus, which he only half helped with. It's a lot of it was run by writer Tony Bascala, I think his name is, but it's got an M. Night Shyamalan touch to it. Mm-hmm. It's good.
Is it?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Shyamalan took everything from the book for this one, which is why you're probably seeing it feel differently.
Yeah.
That's what's happening here. It's so much of this just came right out of the book.
Okay.
We'll get into the differences in a minute. My enjoyment was so peppered by the reading of the novel. I should have been more gripped by it, but I wasn't, because I kind of knew what was going to happen until it started diverging from that. I thought it was well done overall. I thought it was nice to look at, nice to watch. The tension, which we talked about, was well done. Lots of close-ups to give you, to capitalize on the claustrophobia of being trapped in a cabin.
Yeah. Big time.
That's a nice touch. Presentation's fun. The final act is where I'm going to break down in the next segment of our podcast. It just felt really weak-kneed.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's where a lot of it was lost for me.
But on the good side, it didn't overstay its welcome. It was 140 minutes. It's one of the cases where the director had to change the ending. You get a book like this, and the directors feel like they have to change the ending, otherwise why go watch it? And I get it, but he couldn't cook up anything as good as the book's ending.
Yeah. That's what it kind of felt like. It felt like he was trying his hardest to come up with something different, but...
Yeah, but the book itself has I love the book. It got me into Paul Tremblay's writing. I've actually read a couple of his books since. He's a Class A horror writer.
Oh, wow.
I think he's better than Stephen King.
Oh, wow.
Stephen King's really good at characters and plot, but he is not great at dialogue and endings and sometimes. But Paul Tremblay's really good. Let's take a break, and so that we can spoil things on the other side of this break that's coming up.
Fantastic.
Okay. Any shout outs you want to give during the break? Want to say hello to anybody?
This is just for the YouTube thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We just leave this in
I mean,
for
other
YouTube.
than our listener of the week, I guess, I don't know who else would watch YouTube.
Who does?
That's
There's
what
some.
I feel like Brady would. If Brady knew about it, Brady would.
Well, we
but-
get a few views per week on the unedited YouTube version.
It's the real fans.
It's
I guess just shout out to the real fans.
the real ones.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Spoilers for Knock at the Cabin. M. Night Shyamalan directed. If you've seen it, or if you just want to know what happens, this is where we'll get into the specifics of what we liked and what we didn't. You want to know what happens at the end of the novel?
Yeah. Tell me.
Okay, so, by the way, spoilers for the novel. If you want to read it, skip ahead a little. So the novel ends with, when Batista, his character Leonard and Andrew wrestle with gun?
Yeah.
That causes an accidental death of the little girl.
Oh.
And then, because it was an accidental death, it doesn't count as a sacrifice. So the the married couple still have to decide if they want to sacrifice one or the other, and they don't, and they walk. Their car still has flat tires, just like in the movie, and they walk out the road, and it seems as though the world is ending, but it's very ambiguous.
That's a fantastic ending.
I know.
That's really good. Like, I really wish he kept that. Wow.
See, it's so stirring. But like I said, now that you know that, you can see that Shyamalan just did not have the guts to do that.
Because that's fantastic. That's really good.
No one wants to show a child's death, even in fiction.
I mean, yeah.
And that makes sense, but at the same time, that plays out. What it does is it turns the story less about... I've got it written down exactly how I would say it. It's less about the moral question of what do we do to save our kid, and it turns it into a much more what do we do to save humanity kind of question.
Yeah,
which is a little beyond and a little deeper. It's pretty. It's too resolved in the movie. It's too...
I completely agree. I expected something different in the film, and especially I feel like he should have kept that, because the way he builds the kid up in the movie, like, she's so lovable and she's so adorable and like
and
she's
well played.
Yeah, she's so well acted in this movie, and I feel like, and I could even see, like, when my mom was watching it, I could see my mom getting attached to her, and I think everyone really got, like, the book's ending would have created a better impact, and especially left the audience with a better message than just, spoiler alert, obviously, but two people live and the world is saved is kind of how this is it. Like, that's it.
The ending of the movie was much more, and I think it would have worked more ambiguously.
Yeah.
So the movie has more of a heroic theme of what we would or wouldn't do for our kids.
Yeah.
And the book has much more of a horror theme of doubt and loss, which is deeper. It's just a next level thing. And the book's more complex because it's got Andrew and Eric, the married couple, are trying to figure out, do they want to make any more sacrifices to save humanity?
Yeah, and I have written, I think that's like, as a whole, that's such an interesting, like, topic to, like, dabble in, is because it's so relatable to the audience, especially people that are married and have kids. But even, like, myself, like, putting myself in that scenario, like, I wouldn't know what to do. Like, I would feel the same, like, confusion and, like, wrestling with their own selves that they feel. And I think it's such an interesting topic to discuss, especially with others, and especially in film, because you can really put yourself into that role and understand, like, what these characters are going through, which is another positive I said about it. I don't really think there's any, like, dumb decisions made here, like in typical horror movies. I think everything is pretty standard and everything works really well. And it makes sense, again, because you can put yourself in that situation and you can be like, okay, but what would I do? Like, this isn't a stupid decision. They genuinely have no clue. And that's exactly how you would feel.
Okay, let me ask you this. When you say there's no dumb decisions, you mean by the characters or by the filmmaker? Like Shyamalan?
By the characters.
So I was going to ask you, is there enough ambiguity? I keep using that word. Is there enough doubt? Because I think this movie wants to play with the idea of doubt versus faith, which is something Shyamalan's interested in, but he does not.
Yeah.
He doesn't get there.
Yeah.
He didn't get there because of this third act.
Yeah.
Is there enough doubt in you as a viewer on whether these four people are crazy or if they're called, like, by
the horsemen? Yeah.
Yes, the horsemen. I love that, by the way, which is from the book.
Yeah.
Like, were you trying to balance it? Like, oh my God, they really are horsemen, and then
Yeah, for a
Okay.
little I was, and I was like, okay, like there is, and that's what I really wanted it. I wanted this film so bad. When it started, I was like, okay, this could be really good if they keep that ambiguity and they keep it to the viewer. But from the very first like TV news thing, ruined for me. Ruined for me.
That's in the
Because
book, and in the
yeah,
book,
yeah.
it's so much. It causes a lot of doubt for you as a reader because you're thinking, okay, they really could have just known this was going to be on TV because
Yeah.
of 4 hours earlier there was an earthquake.
Yeah, but with like the movie, I feel like that question is left not even as a question because like especially and that's probably a lot easier to say because I'm watching it acted out and like more and more I see the characters getting distressed. Like for example, like the Four Horsemen, which I'll just call them for the rest of this. I see the Four Horsemen get more and more stressed when each one happens, and like the way they execute each other throughout the movie like makes me believe more and more. Okay, like they really are the Four Horsemen, and like I kind of lost all like doubts that the that the couple had throughout once I watched like the first two news coverages. But I feel like if I read the book, I would have had more doubt and it would have been more ambiguous. But I really did want it to be like that, and I wanted it to be that kind of ambiguity, as we keep using that word, but I mean it works really well for this. But that they would have kept throughout the ending, but it just wasn't, especially with the very, very end just completely confirming it.
This could have been one of the great horror films, or at least thriller films, if Shyamalan would have just stuck to the guns of this is a movie about doubt versus faith. Because there's a lot of moments where you can say, I don't believe what y'all are saying, but I believe that you believe it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just fascinating. And how far do you let that go? I don't know. It's just, it makes the ending so much more frustrating. The ending, of course, is Andrew, the more aggressive, assertive father in a way. He and Wen, the young adopted Chinese girl, they just drive away and it looks as though the bad stuff has stopped. And that's just so... I say it looks as though it's pretty much... I mean...
It's clear.
It's pretty clear. It's 85% sure that everything's okay.
Yeah.
And what was the deal with them playing with the radio? One turned it on, one turned it off. I thought that was a really dumb move.
Yeah, me too. And like I knew that when like they were going to the cabin and they were playing that song, I was like, okay, like this is classic, like that's gonna show up again. But I mean, come on, like the ending with that, like that, it just felt cheap and it felt not deserved, in my opinion.
It did feel cheap. It was so elementary school director.
Yeah.
It was like, he's going to turn on the radio, but when he hears that things aren't okay enough to turn it, but she'll turn it back on for him. And then, I don't know. It was so basic.
I agree.
That part,
I agree.
especially. And the ending in general, they get to the cafe. That's not in the book. Like I told you how the book ends.
That could have been completely cut. Like that.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I even think this film would have been even 20% better if maybe they don't keep it that ambiguous throughout the film, which they already don't, but they keep how everything is throughout the film, and then at the very end they keep it at least like 40% ambiguous of like, okay, maybe this was all just like a hoax and maybe everyone was not telling the truth. But you see, like with the very end, with like that whole storm and everything that was happening outside, that completely ruined it for me. I'm like, okay, now, like if they just didn't even add those little like special effects that they did, I would have been like, okay, like everything looks a normal way. Like maybe these people were just crazy this entire time, and that would have been so much better, in my opinion.
Doubt is scary, and if Shyamalan would have just kept you as a viewer like, oh my God, maybe they weren't wrong, or maybe they are. This just didn't work. It's all in the last act, which is where Shyamalan has been criticized the most.
Yeah, And I think it's another case of it just really falling apart because I was super engaged in Act 1 and 2, and I thought they were both very interesting. And I love this film could have been stuck in a place where it was I expected it to kind of get stuck in a loop of they don't listen and then another person gets killed, and they don't listen and then another person gets killed. But they changed it up by the couple fighting back and trying to escape, and the kid kind of cutting them out of their bonds or bondage at one point, and then like they mixed it up back and forth, and which I thought was very entertaining and kept the audience entertained. And then in the final act, everything kind of screeched to a halt and it fell off.
Much of this comes from the book, so smart use of Shyamalan for keeping this in. I thought these worked well on screen as well. Using keeping the couple gay to blur the motives of the attackers.
Yeah.
That happens. It's a little bit more fleshed out in the book about that guy being an attack. A little bit. So you're wondering, oh my God, they're there just because they're gay. So you do wonder that, especially in the book, but it's in the movie. The image of the trapped grasshoppers at the beginning is kind of effective. It's in the book. The events on TV being put to questions in the book, but it's also, I think, like you talking about, worked the first probably 2 times pretty well. The shots really looked like shots and not just something you would see on TV.
Yeah. They were pretty. I liked how this was shot.
Yeah, it had a cinematic look, and movement of the camera was cinematic. I thought that helped a lot, where maybe the story even dropped some.
Yeah.
But even that went away in the last act. Didn't you feel like you talked about that CGI stuff? Even the nice
I thought that was
touch.
cheap.
Yeah.
Again. Yeah.
So think about that opening scene where you get Batista walking from the distance.
That was beautiful.
Wasn't that nice and scary?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, acting was good. First 2 acts are really, really good. I think you could probably even show this to a film class on the first act and say, this is how you build tension. But
yeah,
midway through the second act and third act, it's gone. Was there too many flashbacks? What did you think about the use of those?
See, in my opinion, in most films, flashbacks can be used as a way to cheaply describe things to an audience, the same way that exposition dumps are really cheap and annoying. But again, I thought the flashbacks here were, for the most part, deserved, other than the fact that I feel like you can build up a relationship between 2 characters without showing their past. And I think it's most effective when you show a character's love for each other in this very moment without having to go back and be like, oh, hey, look, they adopted this girl and they really do love her, I promise. Now look at these flashbacks that show this. You can show that in the scene that you're trying to show it in without having to resort to a flashback. But overall, I felt like the flashbacks were great, and I felt like they used the characters pretty well, especially the flashback of Rupert Green's character. I forget his name.
Rupert Grint. Raymond was what he went by, I think. But he wasn't Raymond.
I think him attacking one of them, and then him like training and even buying a gun at one point was a really good flashback, and I thought that not only helped explain a lot of the reasons behind everything, but also added to the film as a whole. But I could have done without maybe one of them. But I also feel like it did help kind of break the tension when it needed to be, and it needed kind of a break at some points.
Probably needed something. The flashback with one of their parents coming, and that seemed odd.
Yeah, that was the one that I could have done without. I really could have kind of... I didn't care much for that.
Unless it's just to drive home that gay people are still persecuted and not as welcomed. But it felt like the attack did that as well. So I don't know.
Yeah,
the attack in the bar.
Yeah,
the conflict in the bar. Yeah, I think we give it a little bit of if we did stars or ratings, we would give it kind of high stars, or at least just above middle.
3 out of 5. Yeah, 3 out of 5.
We would give it just above middle, probably because of what was good was pretty doggone good, and then if you're a little forgiving of how it ends, maybe if you're forgiving of how it ends, but you wish it was something else. I'm telling you, the book was pretty good. I read it as a October Halloween read, and it works.
I mean, yeah, that ending sounds fantastic. It sounds like what it should have been.
Yeah, you're left with this pretty apocalyptic image, more so than the movie does. Okay, we'll wrap. That's the end of the episode for our week. Here's the deal. If you'll leave us a review in Apple, we will read it on air, and we'll thank you for it. But follow us online. We're on all social media, especially the Alabama Take itself. You'll see clips, you'll see posts, you can talk to us, and we'll talk to everyone later. Thanks, Ty, for joining me. See ya.
Of course, see ya.